The number one skill you need as a new land investor. All right, guys, before we get into this video, I just put together a webinar. I'm going to share it with you guys real quick. So it's at that link right there, 90 days to your first land deal. It's free. Head over to this page, put in your information, and get this webinar while it's free. It's a 2 hour plus crazy baller webinar. And if you're just getting started in land, well, you need to watch it. Okay, so this is going to be a controversial take. It might even peeve some. I'm going to dispel one of the stupidest things that I ever heard and continue to hear in the land space. And that's when people say, this is a sales and marketing business. Yeah, of course. What business isn't a sales and marketing business? But people pretend like it's somehow this 50-50 clean division, 50% marketing, 50% sales. And what I've seen from working with hundreds of new land investors, that's actually not entirely true. Now, of course, they rely on one another. They are intermingled and symbiotic. But the number one skill that you need to develop as a new land investor, if you're looking to scale up quickly in this business, if you're looking to do deals, in fact, if you're looking to have an optimal return from your marketing, is being good at sales. In fact, what I've seen from working with so many folks is the outliers, the folks that get crazy good results. There's a few reasons as to why this happens, both in terms of how they engage with Leah and watching the content and all simple things like that. But if I had to define one commonality between all of them, is that they're good on the phones. No fear to pick up the phone and call anybody, and they will talk their ear off and listen their ear off for as long as it takes to get that deal done. That is the superpower here. My thesis is that the land business is 10% marketing, 90% sales. I think it's that lopsided. You could put me on the phones and I don't care what lead source you give me, I will get deals. And in fact, I've proven that. When I first got started in this business, by about my first year in, I wanted to get more deals, but couldn't afford more marketing. So I started picking up the phones and just calling people. And I got 2 deals, and it took me maybe about 4 weeks, somewhere in that range. I quickly stopped because it was laborious and I made enough money for some other deals to reinvest in marketing. But talk about a cold lead. I mean, you're just calling strangers. Like, that's ultimately one of the best litmus tests for how good are you on the phone. And so if you're one of these new land investors coming in who's scared to talk on the phone, scared to talk to people, don't have an acquisition process or a formula to follow, or worse, you're trying to delegate your acquisitions right out of the gate, I'm sorry, that's never going to work. It won't. And I've seen enough data now to tell me that's true. And so if there's one thing for you to develop, one thing to get really, really good at, above anything else, becoming phenomenal at sales. Now, the good news is in this business, when I say sales, honestly, sales is probably the wrong word. Become phenomenal at having thick enough skin to talk to strangers where it does not affect your little fragile ego. You don't care if you get rejected, told no, people tell you to fuck off, people tell you you're weird. You've got to develop some thick skin. You got to develop some stamina to sit in the eye of the storm. I see so many softies out there that their ego is so fragile, or maybe so big, I don't know, that they're too scared to pick up the phones and call. Look, I don't know about you, but if I want something bad enough, I don't care what I got to do. I'll call someone on the phone and speak a different language if I have to. I don't know what drives that. Maybe it's a lack of understanding what their why is, or maybe the vision isn't clear enough. I don't know, but you've got to get over that. The next thing is you've got to get really good at listening. That is the meta skill of sales. You lob softball questions and then you listen. And ultimately it makes your job so easy because you don't have to think about how to be engaging or exciting or know all the right things to say. Ultimately, you just got to listen and ask great questions. And so when we look at the ratio of a good call, it's like 30% you talking, 70% the seller talking. It's pretty easy breezy if you ask me. Now, on top of that, you've got to be willing to actually ask for the close. I see a lot of folks that do all the rapport building, but they're too scared to get the seller to take the next step. You know, in a lot of cases, the seller's not going to lead the combo. The seller's not going to close themselves. You do have to ask for some kind of commitment or some kind of next step. Maybe that looks like reviewing the contract on the phone with them. Maybe that looks like actually making a concrete offer and making them make a decision on the phone. I see a lot of folks that are real loosey-goosey. They never give the seller a real number. They never actually make a bona fide offer. They never walk them through the contract. It's like this very non-committal because they're so scared to get told no. The mindset I had to develop getting on calls was that I don't care which way this goes. Good or bad, I'm still going to make the call. Now, the irony is I used to have immense anxiety calling sellers. Now, I could talk to people like I was fine in a sales environment, but for some reason, land really threw me for a loop because I was so scared that I was going to look like an idiot or say the wrong things, or that they were going to find out this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. You know, I was trying to play the role of an expert, but I knew nothing about land or real estate. So I actually had a really hard time. I would actually dread calling sellers. And in fact, there's many instances where I didn't act rationally and I wouldn't call sellers because I was so scared. You know, I would get a form from Pat Live and I'd see how grumpy or crazy they were. And I'm like, I'm not going to call this person back. And so when I poke holes at the fragile ego or all those things that if I'm calling you out, I'm ultimately calling myself out because I've been there. I know exactly what it's like. But at a certain point, I had to overcome that. And that's one of the most interesting phenomenons that I see, again, just from working with so many people. It's really Leah, it's a luxury in a lot of ways because I get a really interesting look into human psychology, the human experience, and what it means to be an entrepreneur. And in a lot of cases, we are our greatest enemy. We are the bottleneck. Now, people always blame it on strategy. This strategy doesn't work. Or I need texting or RVM. No, it's like, no, dude, the strategy doesn't matter. It's a you problem. It's almost always a you problem. And a lot of times we bring our baggage to our entrepreneurial journey. Someone told us that we were stupid on the second grade playground, and that still festers and sits in our subconscious when we pick up the phone to call some 65-year-old grandma to buy our land. When you think about it rationally, it's absolutely insane. And so that's why I always say entrepreneurship is one of the greatest personal development journeys, because it makes you look in the mirror and say, holy crap, I am the roadblock. I am the bottleneck. I am the thing preventing myself from going further. And I see this a lot. We work with folks that are extroverts and introverts inside of Leah, of course, as you'd expect. And the introverts want to do everything to run away from the work of calling strangers. Either they don't adhere to the sales process we give, they have really brief and short and odd phone calls, they never ask for the sale, sometimes they don't even call, or in some extreme cases, they try to hire someone right out of the gate or get someone to do it for them. And ultimately, I believe that never works because you don't even know how to do the thing. So how could you ever manage or lead or train someone or set proper expectations for a hire, for a partner, or for an employee if you haven't done it yourself? One of my theories about land in any business is before you hire, do the thing yourself. All the bad hires I've ever made are when I'm hiring for roles that I don't understand. I don't understand the workload. I don't understand the expectations. Like last year, I lost $100,000 in about a 12-month period with hiring one person for a role I knew nothing about that related to paid media. So I said, let me just go find an expert and pay them a lot of money, and that should all work out. And I never took the time to actually learn paid media, and I got smoked, steamrolled, destroyed, smacked upside the head. And it reinforced a belief that I already knew, but for some reason I thought, no, this is one of those times where I can do it. It's like, no, you got to have at least a foundational understanding. Now, going back to the other flaws I see. On top of that, if you're not inside of Leah, I see folks that just don't have a sales process. They just got no way to work leads outside of that initial touch. And they don't realize that selling land for a seller is an emotional journey. It's a big process. It's a long sales cycle. This is not the kind of thing where you pick up the call once and it's done. This is the kind of thing where you talk to them for 6 months, 12 months, 24 months to get a deal done. I always use this as an example, but if I showed you my CRM right now, you'd say, holy shit, the amount of touches you have with these sellers is bananas. Well, because that's what's required. Especially if you start going after big deals, that's the requirement. So if you get on a call with a seller and you don't get a yes on the first, second, third, fourth call, that means nothing. That means absolutely nothing. You need a process to stick with that keeps you in the game no matter what. Where your own little sensitivities don't get in the way from you adhering to a sales process. So you need a sales process. And of course, you need to actually be implementing the sales process. And if you're inside of Leah, go and look at what we teach for our sales process and compare it to what you're doing today. Are you doing it? And if you're not doing it, again, you are your greatest enemy. And if you don't have a sales process, you need a sales process. Again, you are your greatest enemy in that case. And the last thing, which is an interesting one, this is a lot more nuanced. And I will say this takes a little bit of time to develop, kind of like a sixth sense ultimately. But I think when people have a lack of familiarity with sales or dealing with sellers in particular, they don't know how to read the subtle signs of qualification. And so what they're looking for is a binary yes, no. Yes, the seller is saying they want to sell. No, they don't want to sell. Okay, it's an unqualified lead. What they don't understand is it's much more subtle. And again, this goes back to the sales process. It might take you months to get to a yes. And so my reverse qualification, as long as they're not hanging up on me, telling me to F off or that they hate me, it's a pretty qualified lead. That's all I'm looking for. So long as their property is actually a decent property, right? Property's got to be qualified. If they're still on the phone with me after weeks and we're going back and forth and we can't agree on price yet, but we're kind of hemming and hawing, they don't want to list it and they're still talking to me and they haven't told me to F off. Yeah, it's a qualified lead in my. And so I'm looking for kind of like the reverse of that. I'm just looking for, as long as they don't give me the bird and tell me to bounce and never call me again, there's something there. And so I think folks are taking it so literally for like, it has to be served up to me on a silver platter, blatantly obvious this person wants to sell. And that's really not how this business works. At least not in my experience, at least not in the experience that I see for the folks that are making big money in this business. And it's really interesting. Like I have seen folks that send the same amount of marketing that start at the same time, whose paths go like this. One person kind of goes like this, the other person goes straight up and to the right. And the only differentiation I can see there is sales ability. Now you might say, oh, that's luck. No, I've found it enough times over again. That's not luck. In fact, take someone like Dennis Yasko. We built a program around Dennis Yasko. He's now one of our coaches, called our 90-day Zero to Hero program. We are releasing this to the public again here. So eventually you guys will be able to get access to it. It's a really cool case study program where in 90 days, we started in with $10,000 and turned it into $240,000 in 90 days. Now, did he have the oversight of me working with him? For sure. Yeah. Without a shadow of a doubt. But I see people that in 90 days don't even have a contract. So what's the differentiator? Well, Dennis is a beast on the phones and Dennis has really thick skin. He's not afraid to get slapped in the face, kicked in the nuts, told no. And so in fact, actually in those modules, we have the recorded seller calls where you can go and listen to them. That's also why Dennis runs our bi-weekly sales training call inside of Leah. But here's what's the most interesting thing. The folks that struggle the most with acquisitions and sales are also the folks that will not show up to our bi-weekly sales training calls. They will not get on there and share their calls. They will not go on there and call sellers in real time. Why is that? And I'm not here to call anyone out. This is like, I'm talking from like a macro, like literally like statistical side of things. The folks that show up to those calls are usually either really fearless or they're already gung-ho about sales. It's because the same kind of person that's scared to pick up the phone is the same kind of person that's scared to get critical feedback in front of a public audience. And so while this is actually, I'm talking about sales, ultimately what this is a skill set of having really thick skin, which you need as an entrepreneur, but you really need in a business like this, because you don't have to be some objection handling, savage, gunslinging, closing machine. In fact, you just need to be able to sit in the fire and have thick skin and take critical feedback from a seller, or get told no, or make a mistake, or hop on a Leah sales training call and have your call listened to by 50 people and just sit in that fire and take the feedback and grow and learn. So ultimately, I guess if we want to take it one step further, the ultimate skill for new land investors is having thick skin. And that thick skin is what allows you to sit on calls, to reach out, to follow a process for your sales. It allows you to go and get feedback from a group like Leah and actually have your stuff broken down, where you actually go and call leads in front of an audience and you have them picked apart by a professional sales trainer. Like, that's the ultimate skill, I suppose. In fact, when I started this video, I didn't even think that that was the ultimate skill. But the good news is you don't need to be this gun-toting crazy salesperson. You just need to be fearless and have thick skin. Part of doing that is really understanding what your why is. And when your why is powerful enough, the work becomes easy. The work becomes a necessity. You don't even second guess it. So get out there and call your leads. Get out there and show up on our Leah sales training calls. Get out there and get better. Get out there and build some thick skin. Get out there and recognize how strong you really are. Because when you take that criticism or you get told no, you recognize it doesn't change who you are. It doesn't change the light within you. It doesn't change the potential for what can happen on the next call. It's all up in here. This is the bottleneck. So prove to yourself that you're stronger than your limiting beliefs. All right, guys. Bye.